So I watched Ahsoka, and I have some questions. Give you my honest thoughts about this TV show, about Star Wars in general, and where the direction it's going, and how I don't particularly care for the direction it's going. I think it has gone more and more immature over time, especially compared to the original trilogy all these years ago. I've watched all the original episodes, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy. I've watched the Obi-Wan series. I've watched most of the Mandalorian. I've watched maybe an episode or two of Andor, so I didn't finish that one. Quite frankly, I got too bored with it. So I've told it's actually pretty decent, but it's too boring. It didn't really sustain me. And now I got to Ahsoka, and I've watched Ahsoka because I figured, hey, I'm going to give it one more shot. To be honest, this whole show could have been narrowed down into maybe an hour. Honestly, the pacing was terrible in my opinion. I could have sped up 10 seconds and it wouldn't have mattered. I want to leave my review for a different video. In fact, I'm going to do two videos. I'm going to do a review of the whole series, and then I'm going to review uh, episode 8, which is what I had just watched. But with this video, I want to talk more about innovation and inspiration, why it's a highly valued thing within movies and books and TV shows and any kind of medium of any kind. And inspiration really helps us all in a sense. But I think there was just way too much of it in this series, and quite frankly, doesn't really qualify as typical inspiration per se. And I think this show just straight up copied a few things from other mediums and then just changed a few things. But I think this series goes too far on the inspiration route and starts to become imitation. And unfortunately, when you start going to imitation, I think of the quote by Oscar Wilde: imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. And what that basically means is when you imitate something so much, you are basically telling your viewers, your viewership, your crowd, everything, that your work is not as good as the work that you are imitating from. And that's kind of how I felt with Ahsoka. I wasn't necessarily invested. There's no reason to invest. I didn't care about any of the characters. Too much time would go past between different scenes where you could just condense it. You could almost condense every episode into 5 minutes. And so I didn't really feel like my time was very valued as a viewer. In addition to that, like, I felt like, again, the inspiration was almost imitation, to the point where if you're just going to imitate stuff, well, I can do that. Anybody can do that. You need to have good writing, and it's about time that good and bad writing gets addressed. We need better writers for these TV shows. But I want to go through a few things, some of the imitation that I have seen throughout the series, and a lot of you guys have said this as well. But go ahead and let me know in the comments if you've seen something that I may have missed. I'm still a little new to this, so I'm just trying to play this out. Let me know what you think, but I'm going to go through a few of these here with you all. And I got 4 in particular. I'm sure there is more. I've heard there's more. I think I'll do another additional video on the whole memberberry thing because I've seen a lot of it. I've seen where Anakin's here as well. It's a spoiler alert if you haven't known that, but you probably did. And I'm going to kind of go through those because I think some of them serve more as fan service in a bad way, and so I kind of want to address that, but that'll be a separate video. So I got 4 things in particular that I feel like the inspiration was a little bit too much to the point where it was imitation. And so we'll get started with these 4. The first one I want to address is what I call Ahsoka the White. And a lot of people are joking about this, and there's a pretty good understanding why. So in episode 5, Shadow Warrior, well, before that, in episode 4, she fell off a cliff and landed into some water. In episode 5, now she is kind of having a dream per se. You don't really know if it's actual, like if she's actually in the water, or if she's dreaming, or if this is an other world, else world kind of thing. The point is, in real time, she is in the water while these events are taking place. And so, while she's in here wandering around, she meets Anakin, and so they duel. They go into her past, and pretty much half the episode is talking about her past. But at the end of it, She awakens from the water, and now she's dressed in white. And now that is very similar, of course. I feel like a little too similar to Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring. One of my most favorite trilogies is Lord of the Rings, and towards the 3/4 into the movies, maybe 2/3 into the movie, they go through the mines of Moria. Gandalf is hesitant to go in, but because he knows he might have to confront the Balrog, and of course that he does. And then, everybody's seen the movie, of course, and if you haven't, you're definitely missing out. But he confronts it, he falls down with it, he battles it, he beats the Balrog, but he also passes into time, basically, and has this whole transition, and he comes back as Gandalf the White. And so it's very similar. He was dressed in gray, he turns dressed in white. Same with Ahsoka, she's gray, turns into white, and kind of goes through this whole process, this revelation, this battle per se. And I felt like obviously it was inspired by it. We know this. But I felt like this was a too on the nose for true Lord of the Rings fans. I know some people were happy that it was kind of a parallel, but I think that's a little bit of a bad taste in my opinion. It just, again, it's fine, honestly. Like, if you want to compare that and get inspiration from it, that's one thing. But this is a little too much into the imitation, in my opinion. Like, this is obvious, a one for one parallel of the same process. And again, I understand that Dave Filoni is quote unquote inspired by Lord of the Rings, but I felt like he basically just took it, cut it out of the Lord of the Rings movie, tried to copy it and try to add a few things differently and just put it in. So I think there's a fine line between inspiration and imitation. I think people don't really understand that nowadays. And so I kind of felt like that was a little too on the nose. Didn't really appreciate that. And for one, it's one thing to have it, but what that episode reminded me of is just Lord of the Rings. And that takes me out of the TV show. And that's something that good storytelling should not do. Your story should not take me out of your story and plant me into another story that I like better. And quite frankly, Dave Filoni likes better. And so I felt like that was a little too um, rigid, in my opinion. So the second one was actually towards the end, episode 8. And again, this is spoilers if you haven't seen it. But when Balin is towards the end of the series, and quite frankly, it was kind of a loose ended. He didn't really do too much. He had a fight with Ahsoka in episode 7, but didn't really do much after that. I was kind of disappointed. And it's Ray Stevenson is a very good actor and a very good character, and I hope he rests in peace because he's, I don't know if they're going to have to change the actor or what they're going to do with him, but they left it very open ended, and maybe they did because he did pass away, and so it's heartbreaking to hear that. But at the end of episode 8, he's standing on top of a statue, um, with basically what seems like a man with his arms stretched out, and it looks very much similar to Argonath, which is in the Fellowship of the Ring as well. When Aragorn and crew are going through the waters towards the end of the movie, and this is in the books as well, they pass through the Argonath, the ancestries of Aragorn. And again, I felt like that was a little too on the nose. Wasn't as harsh as the Ahsoka the White, but I felt like it was a little too much, a little too obvious. And I feel like that's kind of where we start to cross the borders between, again, it takes me out of the show. If you show me something that looks exactly like another form of artwork or movie or book, I'm going to take myself out of the show, out of that movie, and look at that one instead. And so all this does is tell me that I should be watching Lord of the Rings instead. The third one was the Eye of Sion. Now, I think we can all understand just by the phrase that I said, it sounds very similar to the Eye of Sauron. And with that, I think we can realize that, all right, the parallel here, we've had Ahsoka the White, we've had the Argonath example. Now we have the Eye of Sion, Eye of Sauron. Like, I think we can kind of conclude that the inspiration is kind of leading into imitation. Now, the Eye of Sion in the show is very different than the Eye of Sauron in its form and function and all that. The Eye of Sion was used as kind of a hyperspace drive, The Eye of Sauron is the Eye of Sauron is much different in its scope. So I get that. So then I at least appreciate the difference of that. But again, you couldn't have changed it. You couldn't change the name, like, or even if you couldn't have changed the name, you've done that. You've done that deliberately to kind of give us this parallel. And again, it gives us the idea that we should be watching something else, and that you've gained inspiration from this show through Lord of the Rings, and therefore you're telling me that Lord of the Rings is better. And I think we can all agree. I think Lord of the Rings is it's arguable to say that Lord of the Rings is probably the best trilogy, probably one of the best books. And so that's not really what I'm saying here, but what I am saying is the parallels here just transcend to, or maybe descend to imitation. And that's frustrating to me because I want to watch a real show. I want to be inspired. I don't want to see imitation because, again, why are you making this show if you're just going to copy off something else? Finally, this was a little bit of a minor thing, but when Balin and everybody was riding through in episode 7, it seemed like they were kind of riding on warg riders, which is, again, a little bit of a parallel to Lord of the Rings. Now, I think that can be a little more subjective if I'm being honest. But again, I probably would not have brought that up if I didn't already see the Ahsoka, the White, the Argonaut, the Eye of Siam, and those things play into it. Okay, so when you have other faults within the show, I start to look at those as well. Like, okay, did you just copy basically this entire thing? Is this just Lord of the Rings with lightsabers? Like, how does that play out? And so those are my concerns. So to summarize, the idea with this is I don't want to pick on a particular show, but I do want good writing. I do want good storytelling. I want to watch a show. If I'm going to invest my time that I can't get back, I want to watch something that's worth my time, that can inspire me, that can give me a good story or just entertain me. It doesn't have to do anything in particular. I just want to walk away with that or get up off the couch and say, "Hey, I enjoyed that." And I didn't really get that with Ahsoka. If anything, it just reminded me of other TV shows and movies and books that I would rather watch that have epic storylines like Lord of the Rings. It's an epic tale. I've watched the trilogy on the extended edition just last week, and very few minutes go by that are unentertaining. It's captivating. It tells a good story about hope, gives us intricate settings and characters and storylines and struggles and victories. And so it's frustrating when I see parallels to like that in the Ahsoka, but they don't even cap capture the essence of what it could be. So it's you can get inspired by these things, sure. I've got no problem with that. But it didn't seem like it even did a good job of that, and it just kind of focused on imitating it like, hey, this was successful. I like this as a story, so I'm going to put it in my story and put my spin on it. Well, that's not really inspiration necessarily. Um, and again, even if it was, which I would argue it's not, even if it was, it needs to keep me into the story. And all it did was take me out of the story. But overall, that was just my opinion on it. Let me know what your opinion is. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments. And I thank you for watching.